Hi, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Map Round Show. This is the Built in California series where I'm connecting you to amazing founders doing cool things. So, with us on the line is guilty as set up and charged is the founder of OmniSync.io, Rupak Doshi. Welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Thanks a lot.
No, it's good to have you here, man. So you guys are doing some cool things in the startup funding space, or funding space, let's say. So curious to understand more and connect you to my audience around the world. So for those of them who haven't heard about what you're doing at OmniSync and all that kind of stuff, why don't you give us a little bit about the about your background, and then give us the elevator pitch to the origins of OmniSync and how it all came about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my background is actually in biotech. So, I'm a trained biochemist, scientist. Did a whole PhD academia thing. At some point, was on track to becoming professor, which I didn't do. Went into industry, worked for a biotherapeutics company for a bit. And then when we started OmniSync, my co-founder and I really wanted to solve the problem that a lot of innovation and new ideas actually die before they even get to a point where they can get a real shot at trying to see if it works or not. And that's purely because the funding that you need to develop really technical ideas at the early stages is pretty hard to come by because investors find that too risky to do. And so there is a significant portion of money allocated from the US government to actually support that stage of a company as long as it's building innovative technology. But most founders either aren't aware of that or find it too hard or too expensive to access that kind of money from the government. And so my co founder and I really wanted to solve that space, which is how do you get really innovative ideas funded? And then at the same time, how do you get those ideas in front of the right people for them to actually take a close look at that technology? And so that's kind of led to the birth of OmniSync. And then with that, we built two products to help startups and innovation seekers as well. So the first product, TurboSBIR, it actually is kind of like it functions like TurboTax for startups to find and apply for government grants and contracts to fund the early stage R&D product development in their companies. And then the second product, Turbo Innovate, functions like a Google for searching, finding, hunting for new innovative ideas from these various startups. And that's kind of used mostly by innovation seekers. So that's who we are.
Cool. So it's pretty it's pretty surreal to think that you were like a qualified like medical science PhD doctor guy, and now you're in now you're in this. But it's so interesting. I wish like we if I wish we all just did the things we intended would happen. You know, like in many cases, like I don't know how you found it, but like you think when you like on day one, it's like, yeah, we're gonna become like we're gonna be like this type of company, you know, we're gonna do this thing, solve this problem for this guy, and then like literally like 12 weeks later, it's like, yeah, that wasn't the thing.
That wasn't so hard. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not entirely thrilled always that I'm not working at the bench all the time like I used to, like my training is. But at the same time, we wanted to solve this problem, and this pathway was what we thought was the most efficient and effective way to solve that problem. And so both my co-founder and I are really opportunistic, technology agnostic kind of folks. We come from the view of like solving the problem no matter what the solution is. We just want to solve that issue, right? So if the
Hmm.
solution is build an AI powered software system, then we don't get scared away saying that, oh, we don't have expertise in that. I think we're pretty good at learning on the job. And that's kind of what we've done. At some point, we might just go back to our roots after this company, right? Exits and everything, and build a biotech company maybe.
Yeah.
But but at this point, we want to solve this problem. This is the most effective way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about this a bit more. So basically, there's two things here. So it's helping small startup companies working on new tech get funding at the early R&D phase, and then the second thing is helping innovators, innovation seekers track and hunt new innovations in any given space.
Right.
So I want to double click on the first one, which is
Mhm.
helping small startup companies working on new tech get funding at an early R&D stage.
Right.
When you say to me R&D, I say medical sciences in my mind. I don't know why. Like and it's
No,
actually it is right. Like okay, because like R&D, it's like what do you research? Medical shit, like biopharma, or maybe it's like. And no, by the way, like, um, I've got a whole network of potential customers for you. Because like I don't know why I was just saying this now to Sona. He runs a hardware, medical imaging
hmm
startup for consumers. So like,
Right, right.
so one, is it only that? Like, is it medical hardware, biopharma, medical sciences? Is it that usually, like, does it over index there 80%? And then but then there's also R&D in these applications. So energy, or maybe manufacturing, or like autonomous driving. For me, I would almost go so far as to say, based on my sense, is that it's like if you're doing hard science stuff, like this is where you go.
Yeah, so we basically tell people that look, if you're actually a bona fide, genuine startup, you're most often building something that either doesn't exist in that way in the market, or it hasn't even been conceived yet by anybody, and you're the first one who's doing it, right? Typically, that tends to not be a service company, because most service companies, they have been done and beaten to death, and that's what is your traditional small business, right? I want to open a restaurant, I want to open a laundromat, I want to do a food delivery business, or whatever. Like, all those are service businesses, right? They don't really have any technology involved for the most part for that to work. Startups, bona fide startups, because they're trying to create something new, almost always there's some element of STEM involved in that product. If it's an app, if it's some sort of a hardware device, if it's to do with new kind of formula for something, there's always an element of STEM, work that goes into building or testing that product. That's basically what we look for, and that's what the governments are looking for. Just for context, health as the agency, right? Health and Human Services, that agency, it funds maybe 40% to 50, 40 to 50% of all startups in that space. The remaining actually comes from a whole mix of all kinds of non-health related technologies, everything from defense technologies to transport to homeland security, agriculture, environmental technologies, ocean sciences. It's pretty much across the board. We've worked with hundreds and hundreds of startups now, and I can tell you, guaranteed, there has not been a single genuine startup that has come to us that we haven't found a fit for amongst one of these small business innovation programs.
Hmm.
So it is pretty much across all areas of science and tech. But yes, there has to be some element of STEM work involved, and which will be pretty much for if you're doing a genuine bona fide startup.
Okay. So, what does STEM mean for all of us that don't live in your world?
Oh, STEM, so science, technology, engineering, math.
Uh huh. See, you're showing your IQ again. You're making us all feel silly. So funny enough, I actually pulled up some stats on the R&D market. So I mean, it's actually quite frightening. So aside from the cost of salaries, R&D requires the most amount of investment, and so it's typically quite an expensive process.
Right.
Excuse me.
And
And
that is
then
why
you
VCs tend to get scared away at the earlier stage, because there's
oh,
no proof that the idea is going to work, right?
totally. I get that,
Yeah.
man. I get that. Um, and then, but just so everyone knows, so the largest two markets are China and the US. So like they eat everything, and the R&D market's like $2.5 trillion. That's how much. That's fucking retarded. Like that's insane. That's a lot of money, man. That's probably bigger than like infrastructure. You know what I mean? It's great.
Yeah, but a lot of R&D actually goes towards infrastructure improvements as well, right? So it's
Mm,
hard to kind of bucket it that way. And this is all of money, not just what the government spends, but also all the money that the companies, the larger corporations, are also investing in R&D, right? So I mean, any of these companies like Tesla's or Pfizer's, or all these companies have huge R&D pipelines, multiple projects all happening. But that's kind of how you stay ahead in the game, right?
mm.
For anybody.
What I also like about what you guys are doing is the second part around, like, because for me, like the innovation seekers, like that's corporate. So those are typically my sense there would be like these are dinosaurs trying to climb trees. And they really would like to innovate, but they have massive corporate inertia and shareholders. So it's like we want to talk about how sexy we could be, but we don't actually innovate as much as we could because it gets killed. Everybody wants their bonuses and things like this. So um, So that's a stigma that's prevailing from my experience. Do you feel like that is a sentiment is in play currently in many cases?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason if you think about it. The whole corporate VC angle, right? So every large company, every Fortune 1000 company or whatever nowadays has a corporate venture arm. And there's a big reason for that being that they've all realized that they don't want to be Kodak, right? Or whatever. That like, before they knew it, the industry is dead because digital imaging came in so hard and so quick that they couldn't even realize that they suddenly just became obsolete, right?
Mm.
Nobody wants to do that. And for that reason, what they've realized is that the most efficient way of staying up with innovative trends is by either investing in startups that are in their space, trying to solve problems that are like interesting to them, or even moving forward and acquiring some of these companies. They also pay IP lawyers or consulting firms like Bain and McKinsey and all lots and lots of money to keep track of what's happening in their innovation space, right? So who's working on what are the trends, which professor did something so groundbreaking that it completely changes the entire industry. All that work all that research is being done all the time by these corporate venture arms. And not just that, even governments, they have the same issue. So governments, one, they have an interest in making sure that the overall innovation competitiveness of the country is at par with other countries, right? That's there. But also, what people don't realize is that governments get their stuff done with the help of small businesses as well. So there's a reason why the Boeings and the Lockheed Martins are so big now. It's because so much work of the government actually gets done by them, right? So all the weapons systems and munition systems and aircrafts and all that stuff, it's built by and large by either the large primes, as we call them, defense contractors, or really small startups who are building small components of these larger systems that people don't realize that came from them. And so governments are looking for small businesses to solve their problems as well, using when it comes to if it's a new problem, it needs a new innovation to solve it. Right?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you a quick story because it's just to maybe add some more context to this latter point that you're making. So, excuse me, there was this startup called SnapScan, and they were in Africa, South Africa specifically, and they created a mobile payments platform
Mm-hmm.
that allowed like a retailer or a merchant, whoever they are, like a table talker type thing with a QR code. You scan the QR code. This was years ago,
Right.
before it was a thing here,
Yeah.
and then you're able to you know transact without taking out a card, and you can avoid the
Mm-hmm.
merchant fees, blah blah. So it's
Right.
a very disruptive fintech product. So what they did was they were like, how do we get millions of customers overnight? And what they went and did was they went and sold to a corporate. So what I'm not saying you doing this. I'm saying I'm using this for context. There's a big question coming. I hope you're sitting down. But so what happens is that unlike America and emerging markets, if you want to scale, sometimes you have to go B2B to C. So in Africa, we don't have 300 million consumers in the US doing what that you can tap up through a Facebook ad. We have like 55 million, right? So it's difficult to scale. So what most startups do, most of them, is they go B to B to C. So they want 10 million customers overnight. Who do I go to? Standard Bank, who has 10 million customers across Africa that
Yeah.
all want to pay through mobile payments. Most of them are unbanked, blah, blah. And so they got acquired by Standard Bank. And then nothing really happened. It became from my perspective, it became a poster child of what could have been and what didn't happen
Mm-hmm.
because there was a lot of promise from the corporate to say, hey, give us your technology because we can't innovate, so we'll acquire it. And then what we'll do is we'll give you access to our customer base. So it's a massive promise. Everyone's like, yeah, woo, we're innovating. And then the startup's like, yeah, woo, we're scaling. And then none of that shit actually happens. So what happens is that there's this sentiment is like startups go to corporates to die,
Mm.
right? What are your thoughts on that whole thing? Like, do you feel that's a risk? Because like, if I know I need the money, like I get it. I know I need it to fund my early stage R&D. Otherwise, it's really hard. So I need to take the money, but if I take it from the wrong people, or if my terms aren't right, or and this could actually be a case of me working with the wrong corporate at the right time, you know?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, no, there's definitely a stage. There's something called like being too early for a strategic investment. What you're defining is basically a strategic investment from a large corporate into a smaller company, right? It happens all the time, and you're right. So it's even statistics, right? Over 90% of all of these acquisitions, strategic, they all fail for reasons that are either like the mission of the larger corporate changed, their directionality changed, budget allocations happened, or they were acquiring that or taking that just to stop them from getting into the market because their legacy systems would basically get outdated, right? So there are those reasons. There's definitely a stage in the lifetime of company where you're too early for that kind of an investment or that kind of a partnership with a larger entity, and that's usually when you so badly need the money that you would do anything, you would agree to any terms, right?
Mm.
And that's why that's too early for them. Usually, what does happen well, or when it does work well, is when you actually start with some sort of a pilot project where you kind of test the waters by having some sort of a limited license to the tech or some sort of a limited geographical area where you try and co-sell together or something like that, where it kind of shows you that the pathway to integration and implementation is actually working and working to the benefit of metrics of the large corporate. Because if it doesn't, then you know that even if this does get acquired, even if I have a champion who believes in it, as soon as the champion retires, nobody else is going to believe in it or something like that, right?
Mm.
So you have to objectively see that this actually contributes to the bottom line of the large corporate in some sort of a pilot project to then move forward and date longer to enter into an acquisition kind of a discussion, if at all that is a pathway you want to target. A lot of times also depends on the goals of the founders, right? Some founders I know would be very happy with that deal because as far as they're concerned, they made money, I'm pretty sure, from that acquisition deal. Yeah, the technology didn't go anywhere, but they put that problem on the corporate and say that blame is the corporate's fault. I did my job, right? I built the company, I sold it, I exited it, I made money, I'm off to my next thing. So it sometimes it does depend on the founder's goals as well. And that's why some investors would always ask founders, right? Like, what are you looking for in this company? Are you in it for XYZ dollar amount? Or is your goal to generate the largest impact? Is your goal to solve this problem? Like what are you in it for, really?
Mm.
And so for some companies and for companies that where the founders really are keen about solving the problem, no matter how it actually gets solved, then this is just one avenue that you don't take as the exclusive avenue. It is one of the avenues of getting the product to market. So in that scenario, in South Africa, if I was a founder who would care more about the mission that technology needs to exist in the market, would have always gone after that strategic corporate as one of the avenues while also tapping into the other B2C or smaller B2B players to have more of a guerrilla kind of marketing, right?
Mm.
And so it just really all depends on what the founder's goals are at the time and where they are in the lifetime of their company. Some really mature startups, they can do this well because they are able to demand the terms, right, from the larger corporates saying that, look, we already have a business, we already have a market, we have our customers, we have our marketing. Yes, this particular line, customer line, it'll be easier coming through you, but then let's limit your reach and your power or your ownership of the project to that line only.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah. So if you're building like the Amazon of innovations, essentially, uh, where you can facilitate the buying and selling of innovation,
Right.
what's that market? I don't even know. Like, I know the R&D number is huge, but what would you suggest is the value of that buying and selling of innovations? Is it like, do you have any data on that?
That's so what I can tell you is I can tell you some common players in the space and how much they're worth, right?
Yeah, cool. Let's go.
So because what we're trying to, I mean, you can try Googling, a marketplace for innovation or innovation marketplace or whatever on Google, and you'll see nothing much will show up pretty much. And that's because what we're trying to build doesn't really exist as specific towards just innovative products or innovative technologies. That marketplace just does not exist right now, especially not on the global level, right? But some companies that are close to achieving that in some way are companies like your CB Insights, Crunchbases, PitchBooks, because what they've done is they've aggregated information about lots and lots of startups and companies in one place. And they kind of inform the market about who's investing in those places and where is the money really flowing in terms of trends, right, amongst the various companies as they bucket them into different areas like AI and this and that. That's as close as we've gotten as a society to something like an innovation marketplace. And those companies are all worth upwards of multi-billion dollars already. And they're not even, I mean, they're getting there, they're close, they're more of a data science, they're all data science companies. I wouldn't actually term them as marketplaces because there's no buying and selling actually that happens, and it's a market research system, right? So that's kind of the value right now that I can tell you is in this space, right? There's and the reason why it's really hard to put a dollar number on is because it's so new, one, and because the value that an innovation seeker gets from finding the target innovation that they're really looking for, it entirely depends on what's that problem being solved, right? So it can be a huge, right? So tomorrow, let's say there is very clear-cut evidence that life on Earth is about to cease 50 years down the line, let's say, hypothetically, right? What value would you put on a search engine that could give you the innovation that allows mankind to survive on Mars in certain ways? Let's say there's a new system that allows, suddenly if you put that on, humans can breathe the environment that's on Mars, something like that, something ridiculous. What dollar value would any government put on that? How much would any government pay to get the access to that? Right? It's really hard to put a value on that just because it can be so big, or sometimes it can be really tiny too. Oh, like, my bathroom shower, doesn't work very well for this reason. One gizmo or one gadget attached suddenly makes it perfect.
My shower curtain is 1 foot too short to cover the bath wall. Oh, that's funny.
No,
Well,
you know what I mean, right? It's
I do.
it's a kind of a market I mean, Amazon, it's pretty hard for Amazon to also, at the time when they were thinking about this, put a dollar value to how big this could be, because it would entirely depend on how many buying activities can you digitize, right? Can you actually like change people completely from going to stores and doing everything online? That was a big, because if you can, you keep that's almost infinite TAM. Like there's this term that exists in the VC landscape, which is infinite TAM, right? Which is you can keep adding, and there's no end to how much larger can your market actually grow. Because it all depends on how much can you keep adding to your marketplace and how many of those buying activities can you digitize.
Yep, I'm with you 100%. So what are some of your success rates currently from grants?
Yeah, so we basically help startups apply for a particular program in the federal government for small business innovation, right? And we've helped hundreds and hundreds of companies now go through. The national average for companies that go through these, with or without support, the national average is about 15%, which is already much, much better than so the hit rates when it comes to getting a response from an investor, right? Be it hopefully a positive one. But that rate is like in low single digits, if I'm not wrong, right? So 15% is already pretty good. And then our success rates at helping companies win those is actually well, it's about average 35%, and it moves up and down during the year. But that's basically what we say is we can usually increase the chances and odds of winning for a company more than double, compared to if they didn't have our help and if they did themselves.
And the good news is you also have been eating your own dog food, according to a Crunchbase. Because
we
you
definitely
guys
are our best customer.
yeah, exactly. So what I'm saying, just for everyone who's not connecting the dots there. So you guys have raised $2 million from a grant. So that's grants. So that's a good thing. Also, well, at least according to Crunchbase, whose numbers aren't always correct. But we'll let that slide and say that that's cool. But you did, funnily enough, you did close your round out in July. I mean, I suppose you kind of set this one up, but you were saying, there's the success rate of a standard. Well, hey, I need to raise two million, through private investors, whatever. And then there's the grant story, which obviously according to your data, it's more successful. So what was your experience raising money through grants? Was it easier than you expected because you just had relationships there? I'm guessing that's the truth. But what was the reality on the ground?
Yeah. So first of all, this is one instance where Crunchbase is wrong in our situation. So all the money we have raised from the government is not grant dollars. They're actually contracts, and so they're classified on the revenue line as revenue because it is purely money paid to us for developing something that the government needs. So this is our prototypical example of innovation seeker finding an innovation provider, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were looking for a couple of things that we were the best folks to be able to solve that for them. And so we have two contracts for those specific needs that they had that we were able to deliver very well for them. And so and the reason why we were successful in that program is not because we had relations. We none of us actually come from a defense background. So both our contracts are from the U.S. Air Force, and none of us, nobody in our team actually comes from like is a retired Air Force person or a DoD person or nothing like that. We actually have had zero experience going through the Air Force systems, but by nature of what we do as a company, which is we help companies access these programs, we knew the process really well. We also knew our product really well, and we kind of knew what the governments were looking for in terms of what their problems were, right? And so we were the best people to be able to position this correctly for them to learn about what we have and review it well, because we had a really strong team as well too, because we had already evidence that sure we built it, we've done very well, all that stuff, right? And those are the reasons why we ended up winning these contracts, not relations for the most part. And these are contracts, so that's a big correction to be made. So Crunchbase, because there's a big difference. The grants basically are given for investigator-initiated work, meaning that the company says that, okay, I want to solve diabetes, whatever, like I have a drug to solve diabetes, cure diabetes. The government isn't really interested in buying that drug from you, right? But they have a mission to support that and fund that because it's really important for the society as a whole to have that drug, right? So that's a grant, right? The grant was given to the company to build something that is good for science and society as a whole. But a contract is where you're being giving money for building something that the government is actually looking to use in the future. And that's all of DoD, some of the other agencies, they all fund small startups through contract. That's called the funding vehicle. And that's a big difference. Correct. Correct. And that's every year, by the way. It's a yearly number, not total. So every year, upwards of $700 billion are being awarded by all the government agencies to small businesses, universities, nonprofits, like larger businesses, all that. So there's a pretty significant portion that goes to pure for-profit companies. Uh, I think one of the biggest failures was like when we were trying to solve. So because we're so new in the space and we are the first to market with a product like that, like we have, it is a pretty significant challenge to educate the audience, right? To educate the customers. That I mean, you're doing it right now with this podcast. You're trying to educate these startup founders that there's all this stuff out there for you. You should take a look, right? That's a pretty arduous task, right, to do. So we believed that marketing and messaging of what we have is something that we didn't do well, just because we don't come from that background, right? Both my co-founder and I are scientists. We weren't trained on how to say something to somebody so that they actually get it and get convinced to try it, right? That's marketing messaging 101. So we tried bringing on a really experienced person early on back in last year, and that basically, and when we went with an experienced person because we thought that that would be the best way to get the experience we needed to actually do this properly because we lacked the experience. So we questioned ourselves and we brought somebody else on, assuming that that person would actually know what to do with it because they're experienced, right? Lots of years of experience in large companies and all that. That project kind of bombed really badly, really, but like royally, like like and the big learning was that when it comes to startups, nobody knows your product and your technology and what you solve better than you as the founders. And just assuming that someone with a great CV can come in and solve all your problems is a huge mistake, especially at the early stages, because that person got to where they did with a lot of help. And it's really hard to tease out how much of that work was that person's work or somebody else's, like, contributions or whatever. And so the biggest learning for us now is that whenever we bring on a senior person or whatever, that's going to be a significant dent in the budget, it's always as some sort of a trial, some sort of a contract role or something like that, where we can test drive the engagement and their talent specifically to what we do and how we work. That fit alignment is so crucial that that it can lead to months and months of wasted time, effort, and money if you don't do it right. And yes, it's slightly less efficient as a hiring process because now it takes longer to get the right person. But at least when you get the person, that is definitely the right person for the job. Yeah, it's so I mean, PLG product growth is not. I don't think it's a myth. It's just that is also a way of marketing. There is a very clear strategy of how to get PLG out into the market to the people who then get it and convert, even for Dropbox. I mean, simple things like adding some sort of like when somebody gets an invitation to upload something or view something on your Dropbox that you've paid for, that person is also getting marketed to at that time with certain features that encourage that person to sign up as well. I mean, how many times have you received something from Calendly? If you don't have a Calendly, they're like, love this experience, try using it for yourself for free. Like that's PLG marketing, right? Basically let the product do the marketing for you. um, but there is still pretty good marketing involved in that process, and that there's a lot of expertise that goes into designing that sort of a campaign of how do you get that guerrilla sort of user base ground up, right? Where you don't go top down through ads or something. I firmly believe that marketing is much more important than product always, is because there's so many companies out there that have grown really big with terrible products, or I mean, from a technical standpoint, right? I mean, I can name hundreds of them right now on top of my. I mean, the best companies in the world, for the most part, did not have the best products in the world at that time. That's the biggest evidence and proof point that marketing is more important than product for the most part. And that's because at the end of the day, you're trying to sell a product to a customer. That customer needs to be convinced that that product is going to solve their problem. That act is called marketing. How do you message something to somebody to convince them of something, right? That act is marketing. Without that, there is no buying, and buying is an emotional decision. And basically, that emotion needs to get triggered through some sort of a message that they read or they feel, experience, whatever that is, right? And so that's why engineers who believe that, oh, build a product and they'll come, they're so badly mistaken, because who's going to tell your customer about their product and why?
Yeah, so product-led growth, for me at least, it's like it doesn't work in 99% of the time, because if you don't have a category defining product, like if your customers, when you're doing customer discovery, are saying, yeah, well, it sounds similar to something I'm already using, you
Right.
probably don't have a category defining product. And in that case, one should consider that product marketing or product-led growth for your business is a myth.
Yeah, you just have to get to a certain customer, like critical mass of customers that really love your product for that PLG to actually kick in, because that's kind of how then organically it starts to grow from one user to another through multiple users, right? And that initial set won't happen if you don't market your product right, because like you said, even if it's a category, actually, I would argue that a category defining product or category changing product or whatever, their marketing is even more important because there's a huge education element involved because the people don't even know that it's possible to solve their problem with that solution, right? Unless it's really blatantly obvious. I mean, something like Calendly was amazing because it was so obvious. The problem was so obvious that people didn't realize that this was a problem. They're spending time on it. And as soon as they tried the solution, it was a very, very easy thing to understand value, right? And so a lot of the best, those PLG kind of companies, it has been like that. But for that person to actually try it first, there was a pretty significant marketing effort that went into that, right? That's it.
Yeah.
That's super important.
It's like everything. Every time there's no one size fits all. It's like I just feel like people who are sitting in this one camp saying that's the way to go because I'm a tech startup. You know what I mean? We're not going to do marketing because we want to. And I think oftentimes it's the kind of mindsets of the founder, him or herself. You know, because they're like,
I think, yeah. As opposed to going with objective data
yeah,
because if you go with objective data, people will tell you, VCs will tell you, right? That
yes,
go to market is amongst the most important things of a startup that they look at. Like, what's their go to market strategy?
hmm
Um, to predict if it's going to be successful or not. If their go to market says that here we have 100 people who are friends, and then we'll have PLG from there. That's the end of that.
oh my god, oh my word. So what are you struggling with right now?
Marketing.
You heard it here first, people. Oh my
No, it's just
god.
like I don't know because but we've been able to hire well recently after our debacle, right?
That's funny.
And so no, I think what we struggle with for the most part is our revenue models, right? Because we work on the one side. I mean, it's like a marketplace where one side of the marketplace is just they just don't have much money to work with, and then the other side of the marketplace has so much money that they don't know what to do with it, right?
Mm,
And that's kind of what we struggle with. It's like how, as a small startup, how do you handle these different, completely different kind of strategies of getting money, right, from the customer, um, uh, at this early stage, right, without completely having built out both engines and both marketing plans and all that stuff properly. So that's kind of what we struggle with. It's like on the startup side, we're trying to make it as affordable, as easy, as no cost as possible, right? Because they have no money to work with. And so we have really nice, like success-based, contingency-based models for them to work with us. But that's really tough to sustain if we don't make money somewhere else, right? To
mm,
keep that sort of support system up to be able to sustain that, because like a lot of them don't win, right? So there's a lot of work that gets put into that doesn't actually get recovered.
mm,
So that's kind of what we struggle with as a small as a startup, right? Like how do you that complex revenue model? One, how do you execute on it, and two, how do you explain it to investors, right? Because their investors typically are not they don't have mental bandwidth generally to really dig into deep complex business models. They're like, for the most part, they want simple. It works. Here's a B2B SaaS and no other flaky things, no other interesting things going on here and there. They like that for the most part. So
yeah, it is true. Um, it is true indeed. So I want to have a quick bit of fun with you. And so here's where this goes. So I'm going to give you the keys to the Map Round Show time machine. And you can now go back to yourself on day one of this whole venture when you were doing med science. You're like, yeah, we're going to go there. What advice would you give yourself if you could go back to yourself on day one about building OmniSync?
now that I know a few things, right? In hindsight, what I would actually tell myself is look at the revenue models, the likelihood of the revenue models working with the customers before you start planning what you'll build and how you'll solve the problem. Because that at the end of the day, if you can't find a way for the customers to pay you in a way that they're happy about it, you're happy about it, it's sustainable, and it works, then no matter what you build, no matter how good it is and everything, it's never going to work out, because as a company, you'll never be able to sustain yourself and you'll never be able to explain it to VCs. And so that's kind of how what I would tell myself. So now this is what we do every time we think of a new feature, new product, new line, whatever. It's always the first discussion is, all right, how does somebody pay for this and how realistic is that? Right. Um,
Oh my God.
that's just that before problem solution, any of that stuff. It's more about like how will you make money and why is that realistic to think about it like that.
Mm. Well, what I like about what you're doing, it's almost like you're conducting the orchestra, you know? Because on one side you've got hungry startups who need it, and then on the other side you've got these, you know, sort of government, you know, industry bodies, whoever they might be, who have too much money and don't know how to spend it anyway.
Don't know how to, yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so if it weren't for you conducting the orchestra, right, then everything would kind of suck. Do you know what I
Yeah, they
mean?
will
Like,
look at like 20 musicians just playing their own thing.
you're a funny guy, dude. I never expected you to be so funny, but I'm quite enjoying this conversation. Um, uh, so, um, so I want to quickly ask you two things, and then we'll wrap up. Like, what, where are you going? You know, because I think there's always the business that you are now, and then there's the business you're becoming. What do you think that is? Like the becoming piece.
Yeah, we're not Amazon yet. That's what we're slowly becoming, right? One central place for anybody who thinks about innovation to come and either start building one or start looking for one. That's what we want to be. We aren't there yet, right? Our two kind of sides of our business are kind of somewhat not completely connected yet. And they're not established yet. Of one side is further along than the other and all that stuff, right? So that's what we're eventually becoming. We're becoming more of a Google for innovation, but we're not there yet, and it'll take us time to get there. And this has to be a global place. Right now, we're solely focused on the US, but we've already received lots of inquiries from other countries that kind of want to replicate the system there, right? So,
Yeah,
so
yeah, it's
that,
great.
imagine that, right? When you do have that global system in one place, that prediction of innovation across the world, like how that's going to work, what's the next big thing? That's where we really want to be, right? We should be able to predict when quantum computing becomes like, something that'll be on everybody's hands or like that. That's where we do really want to be eventually.
Yeah, it's exciting. I've got a guy coming onto the show now. His name's uh, he's from CIS Lunar Industries.
Wow.
Yeah, so his name's Gary. Yeah, he's like he just dropped me a note now. Gary Cullinan. It's called CIS Lunar Industries. This is gonna blow everyone's mind when I get him on here because like what they've done is like if you talk about innovation, like that space is super exciting. So,
Absolutely.
so you know like space debris,
Right.
right? Like how do you remove like space debris? Because everyone's
Right.
launching their satellites
Yeah,
up there,
just
and no one's giving a
stuff like floating
shit.
around forever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, how the fuck do you remove it, yo? Like, come on, dude. Like, we don't like when we do go to Mars, we don't be like, you know, hitting our own shit in the air, like as we're trying to leave the mess we've created. So, what they've done is they've created a way to remove space debris.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm gonna bastardize this, but basically, it like captures the stuff and puts it through this refinement process in space. So it literally melts and recycles the space debris in space.
Yeah.
Like how?
Yeah. Phenomenal stuff. Yeah, exactly. I
You know,
mean, yeah, who
there,
puts a dollar value on that? Think about it like that. Like, how do you
yeah,
put a dollar value on that when the entire planet might need to, at one point, move into another planet?
hmm.
That technology is what will allow us to get through this, the exosphere or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah,
how
yeah,
do you
yeah,
put a dollar value on that?
yeah. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. So anyway, so let's one more question and let's wrap up here. So why do you do what you do? Like when you get it, when you wake up in the morning, what gets you out of bed?
Yeah, it's so passion project has always been like, so I've always felt that like a lot of people have ideas. People have ideas 10 times a day, right? Like people have ideas. The satisfaction of that curiosity that a human being has is such a inherent need for every human being to consider, like, going through their lives, and that doesn't get satisfied. Like basically the quality of your ideas will basically diminish over time because suddenly your mind's dopamine system starts to basically stop counting that as a reward, right? Whereas when the opposite happens, like when you do have an idea, you can quickly find what's the pathway for that idea. Is it worth it doing or doing it or not? if that actually gets answered, if that curiosity actually gets satisfied repeatedly, your quality of the idea start to elevate. That I think is so badly needed in today's day and age for every human being on the planet, because every country is suffering all kinds of things that basically over the course of history, people have taught us, right? That it's that idea generation and implementation is what gets us from point A to point B, solving problems. So to me, it's always been about, okay, how do you make sure that people actually get answers to these questions about the new ideas that they have? Always, it's always been about that. Like every idea needs to have some sort of an outcome, be it a shitty outcome, but at least there needs to be an answer to this is worth doing or not worth doing. Right?
Mm.
So that's what always wakes me up on, because I hate then that sitting there doing nothing in my head. Like I have a new idea, it's just sitting there. I have no idea what to do with it. I have no idea whether to pursue it, not to pursue it, all that stuff. That's the worst experience, worst feeling.
Yeah, well, dude, you're doing some cool shit, man. I've got a whole network of people I'm gonna push your way. So,
Thanks so much,
but
man.
it's been a real fun time chatting with you, buddy. And yeah, looking forward to see where you're going in the future, man. Congrats.
You too, man. Thanks a lot, and all the best for everything with you and the upcoming one as well.
Yeah, rock on, brother.
Thanks.
Cheers, buddy.
Thank you.
Later.
Bye.